Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of All Elite Wrestling. And let's talk about Dynamite tonight. Of course, Dynamite tonight, we're meant to be seeing anyway, whether or not we actually will see it, is the Championship Unification match. AEW World Champion CM Punk going up against AEW Interim World Champion Jon Moxley to determine the undisputed AEW World Champion. Now, I say if the match happens because, of course, the expectation is that we are still going to get this championship unification match at All Out. Originally, it was the main event for All Out, and then Punk and Moxley brawled on several occasions last week, which led to the announcement that the match was going to be happening tonight on Dynamite in Cleveland on TBS. So we'll wait to see whether it happens, because I think most people, myself included, expect some kind of angle, whether it's a no contest, a non-finish that leads to some kind of stipulation at All Out for their unification match, or possibly we do see a winner and MJF versus CM Punk happens at All Out, something of that nature. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see, but there's some really interesting stories coming out today regarding CM Punk, regarding talent, regarding the rumors of CM Punk having heat or being unhappy or wanting to quit AEW, and just some backstage news about the match itself. So we're going to get into all of them here. Starting off with, there's been a bit of unrest in AEW recently, hasn't there, regarding people possibly unhappy with a lack of TV time, possibly people being open to returning to WWE. Now, Triple H is in charge of talent relations and also creative. There's been rumors about a dressing room divide over people siding with Colt Cabana over CM Punk, or people siding with CM Punk over Colt Cabana, or of course CM Punk's issues of Hangman Page and what happened last week, and people saying I actually sympathize with Punk, or people saying that they don't like Punk. So there is going to be a talent meeting today. This was first broken by Fightful Select by Sean Ross Sapp, who has said, quote, "Some things will be addressed today in Cleveland. Fightful Select has learned and is reporting that there is a mandatory talent meeting today at the All Elite Wrestling Dynamite tapings." Now, Fightful is reporting that Tony Khan, of course AEW's president, CEO, and head of creative, will be present, but not many details are known beyond that. The talent that Fightful have heard from expect it to address some of the rumors of unrest, contract inquiries, and personal issues, as well as those things being leaked. However, they've not been given any firm details on what to expect in the meeting. Fightful will learn to have any details about this, and of course I'm sure if they do, they will provide them, and if they do, we'll talk about them most likely tomorrow at this point. Though the meeting is for talent, there are plenty of talent who weren't brought in for this set of tapings and therefore will not be at the show and therefore miss the talent meeting itself. So certainly significant. You know what is quite interesting, and this is always why when Dave Meltzer talks about AEW, you have to listen. When Dave Meltzer talks about WWE, or he talks about Impact Wrestling, or he talks about any other promotion that isn't AEW, take it with a pinch of salt. When he says his opinion, or where he thinks things are going to go, or where he thinks things are going, that's opinion. And people confuse that with reports a lot of the time. They think a lot of things Dave Meltzer said, or Dave Meltzer said it, therefore it has to be accurate, it has to be a report, it's factual, he's spoken to people. No, a lot of the time it's opinion. It's from a guy that's been in pro wrestling journalism for nearly 40 years, and he's seen a lot, and he sees things going in certain directions, but it doesn't mean he's always right, and certainly doesn't always mean he's spoken to sources that have told him that is going to happen. The reason why you do have to listen to him, though, when it comes to AEW, is because if he's heard something, and if he's talking about it, chances are he's heard it from Tony Khan himself, and it's Tony Khan's company, therefore he's going to be accurate. We know Tony Khan and Dave Meltzer are friends. We know Dave Meltzer's bragged about it in the past. Wow, you've got a booker that grew up reading The Observer, and if it comes to any issue or any story regarding AEW, Dave Meltzer picks up the phone and just calls Tony Khan, and Tony Khan picks up the other line and he tells him what's going on. And the reason why that's significant is because when Dave Meltzer was talking about the heat, or the alleged heat, between CM Punk and Hangman Page, and the reports of them not being happy with each other, and CM Punk not being happy with Hangman Page in the way that he had said some things during promos, and Hangman Page saying that he needed to defend AEW from CM Punk, and the locker room was behind him. Dave Meltzer spoke about it on Wrestling Observer Radio, said the heat was legitimate, and he said there was major backstage drama going on in AEW. And he said, and this is why it's really significant, is he said that Tony Khan would have to call a meeting to prevent anything like this getting bigger, because there was lots of backstage drama going on. So certainly, it's no coincidence that after Dave Meltzer said that, just days later, we have a meeting. Dave Meltzer said, Tony Khan better call a meeting, otherwise it's going to get out of hand. Wouldn't you know it? Days later, there's a meeting going on in AEW. And I'm not saying Dave Meltzer's calling the shots, because he's not. But I get the impression Dave Meltzer may have been told a couple of days ago, oh, by the way, Wednesday, Dynamite, there's going to be a talent meeting. Because there is a lot going on in AEW right now. I've said before, this time last year, AEW had a lot of momentum. A lot of momentum. A lot of people were being released by WWE, and a lot of people weren't happy in WWE. You had AEW picking up big free agents, CM Punk, Bryan Danielson, Adam Cole. There felt like there was a shift, and AEW was becoming a legitimate competitor. Now, in terms of size, of course they're not a legitimate competitor to WWE. In terms of television ratings, of course they're not a legitimate competitor to WWE. But when you had some of those bigger names coming in, there was a feeling of, man, this company's got momentum. They made those big signings. They then had Arthur Ashe Stadium, Grand Slam edition of Dynamite in New York, over 20,000 people. First ever event to be held in Arthur Ashe Stadium. It felt like there was something going on with AEW, and this second promotion was gaining momentum. Fast forward a year later, AEW is much colder now. They are struggling to hit that million viewers mark. If they don't hit it tonight for Dynamite on TBS, I really don't know what they can do to hit it. And that will be a concern. And on the flip side, WWE's got a ton of momentum right now on television. Maybe in terms of the actual company itself, some of these Vince McMahon investigations on a federal level and from, in terms of law firms, that might come back to bite WWE, and we'll have to see what happens about that. But in terms of television, WWE's got a ton of momentum. The product feels fresher, not completely fresh, but it feels fresher than it did before. You've got talent that are happy to be there. You've got talent that are returning. Triple H is in charge of creative and in charge of talent relations, and on top of that, the ratings are reflecting it. SmackDown's getting like 2.3, 2.4 million viewers. Monday Night Raw's getting 2 million viewers again, which is beyond significant for a 3-hour show that a lot of people gave up on a long time ago. So the momentum is there with WWE, and I do think there are people in AEW that they're not going anywhere. People like Malachi Black and Adam Cole have got 4 or 5 years left on their contracts, and there are a lot of people in AEW that have that. But I'm sure there are some people in AEW right now that came from WWE to AEW when they were released or their contracts expired, and they're thinking right now, if I was on the free agency list right now, where would I go? They would go back to WWE because of the relationship they had with Triple H. So you've got that. You've got obviously people calling out AEW for their lack of transparency when it comes to contracts ending, or Tony Khan or talent relations ghosting them. You've got issues about, as I mentioned, people leaking information out. You've also got information when it comes to, or issues when it comes to talent not being used in the oversized roster and the bloated roster. You've got, the situation just like with Jonathan Gresham, of someone that was a Ring of Honor World Champion and wasn't happy with the creative and couldn't get a meeting with Tony Khan and felt like he was being ignored. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. Dave Meltzer is right. There is a lot of backstage drama, and this meeting honestly kind of confirms it. If things were hunky-dory and things were fine in AEW, they wouldn't need to call a meeting. Granted, they could just call this meeting and just say, a lot of the stuff that's out there isn't true. It's all hogwash, rah, rah, rah. But those stories don't come from nowhere. And clearly there is backstage drama going on right now in AEW. Now, is it a big story in the grand scheme of things? No, because it's pro wrestling. And I spoke about this before too. The days are gone of AEW being the plucky upstart promotion to rival WWE. They're a corporate entity at this point. They're never going to be the size of WWE in terms of the bureaucracy and the amount of employees they have and all that kind of stuff. WWE's been around for a long period of time, but I think we've got to get to a stage now where we stop treating AEW like this plucky upstart company. They've been around 3 years. They've got a major television deal. They've got great financial backing in Tony Khan and from the Khan family. They've got big talents on big contracts like CM Punk and Bryan Danielson. They've got good production. They're not this sort of startup plucky company. They're just not. They are not. And because of that, you're going to have the pro wrestling politics that comes with it. You're going to have people that are unhappy, people that don't like the booking, people that think they deserve a better spot on the roster. They're going to have people that are sucking up to the boss to try and get better spots. It's pro wrestling. Pro wrestling will never get away from that. And because of that comes people not being happy, or comes people being upset, or people feeling that they're being slighted. And as I said before, Cody Rhodes was the first big name to jump from AEW to WWE. There will be plenty more that jump from AEW to WWE and from WWE to AEW. If you've been a fan of pro wrestling for long enough, go back and watch wrestling in the 90s. People went back and forth all the time, multiple times, and that will be what happens with pro wrestling, because when you've got competition, it gives people options, and that's not a bad thing. But AEW, I think now, the honeymoon period is well and truly over. And it should be. And AEW is not immune to criticism in the same way that WWE is. So this talent meeting is certainly going to be fascinating about that. But let's move on and talk about Dynamite tonight. As I mentioned, it is going to be CM Punk, Jon Moxley in that championship unification match. Now, of course, Dynamite saw a shock main event made for Cleveland last week as the planned all-out main event between Jon Moxley and CM Punk to unify the AEW World Championships was moved up over a week and a half. Now, according to Fightful Select, once again, AEW sources are indicating that it was actually interim world champion Jon Moxley who was in favor of the move to move the match from All Out to Dynamite. And one source even indicated that it was his idea and pitch, and All Elite Wrestling went with it. Now, the same source, when talking to Fightful, said that, quote, eventually CM Punk agreed to it. Now, they are stressing that they haven't learned if this was connected to any of the reported issues with CM Punk last week, because, of course, we heard those issues that CM Punk was meeting with Tony Khan. He wasn't happy about something, and he was so unhappy about something that there was a feeling among some that he might not even show up to the show, and he might not be on Dynamite, and this, that, and the other. Now, as I mentioned last week when I spoke about the Punk issues, I did find it odd that some heat with Hangman Page would lead him to not want to show up to Dynamite. As I said before, there is more to that. There feels like there is more to that. If you're talking about a feeling among some, by the way he's talking, that he might not show up or he could quit the company, that's more than, there's just a little bit of heat with Hangman Page. There is something bigger at play there, and most of the time it's creative and cash. So hearing that CM Punk eventually agreed to it, you'd go, well, maybe he was somewhat resistant, because it does not make a ton of sense. You've got this planned main event of one of the biggest shows of the year in Chicago, and when they say, okay, we're going to do it 10 days before All Out, it's very Vince McMahon. It is, and maybe that's his pushback of, okay, why are we doing it, and what's the finish, and where are we going to go when it comes to the pay-per-view, and is the buy rate for the pay-per-view going to be down because the fans have already seen it? Is the anticipation for the match going to be down because the fans are going to see it? Now, they're saying eventually Punk agreed to it. Was he told the plan? Was he told the creative? Was he told the finish of, you're going to have the match here, but this is what we're going to do. We're going to go in this direction. It's going to be a non-finish, and we're going to have a steel cage match, or we're going to have a situation where Moxley wins, but Punk, you turn heel, and then you win the championship back in Chicago, but you're a heel, or Punk, you win, but you turn heel in the process, and you're going to be facing a babyface MJF All Out, even though to me, whilst that does seem like a big match, it doesn't make a load of sense because we're running out of time to promote it, and maybe Punk would say we need more time to promote that, don't we? I don't know. We don't even know if, again, these were related to Punk's issues that he was clearly having in the company last week. Now, Grapsody Podcast, which of course is a Fightful product, the host Will Washington noted on air that he had heard there was an idea in play a few days before to increase ticket sales and add buzz to the Cleveland AEW show. Fightful has reached out to AEW officials who did not respond when asked to comment on this story. They have not been told of any creative plans heading out of this match. Fightful Select was told last week that the decision was not the original plan and that multiple plans for AEW All Out had changed. Now, again, this is why I talk about AEW not being this plucky startup company that it was in 2019, because previously we'd heard, Tony Khan had his first 4 world champions mapped out, and he planned things way ahead of time, and he would have these long-ranging, months in advance plans for certain talents. And I still do think that is the case for some, but you have to be flexible. Things do change. You have to be flexible, and we saw with Forbidden Door. That pay-per-view was not what it was meant to look like. Those plans changed a lot because of injury. And I'm sure circumstances changed a lot of things when it comes to All Out too. I'm always weary of hot-shotting stuff. I think that historically hot-shotting has never worked. It's just like anything. It works in the short term, and maybe tonight Dynamite will do a good number on TBS. Maybe it will do, it should do over 1 million viewers. Maybe it does 1.1 or maybe just 1.2, and AEW celebrate and go, see, we were absolutely right to do it. But in the long term, where does it lead you? In the long term, what's your plan? What's the plan coming out of Dynamite tonight? And how do you get to the pay-per-view and still have a main event that feels big time and feels like a match, or doesn't feel like the match that we saw 10 days prior on TBS? How do you make the fans pay for it, basically? And you could argue that it's genius in some aspect because you have to tune in tonight to figure it out. And that's perfectly accurate. I'm fascinated to see how they play out tonight, but they've got to get it right. A screwy finish, it's not going to fly with a lot of people. AEW hasn't built their reputation on giving many screwy finishes. So, again, I'm fascinated in that, and maybe that's the point. Get some tickets. Sell out some tickets, sell out the venue. I don't know what the ticket situation is looking like for Cleveland tonight, but also build up intrigue, get people wondering, get people guessing what is going to happen tonight. I'm saying it now. I've said it a million times during this video. What is going to happen tonight? The expectation is we are going to see CM Punk versus Jon Moxley at All Out for the AEW World Championship, the undisputed AEW World Championship. So if they're having the match tonight, how do they get from here to there? My only thing is a screwy finish. Unless we crown an undisputed champion tonight, but there is some kind of angle that leads to the match in 10 days' time feeling fresh. Again, how do they do that? Because if that's an angle, this is a world championship match. This is a unification, undisputed world championship match. If they're going to do an angle where somebody turns heel or somebody interferes or even a non-finish, it's the biggest angle on the show. So what are they going to do to get from A to B? And again, these are good questions to have, but you have to get the right answers too. That's the key in all of this, I believe anyway. Now, CM Punk, of course we are talking about Punk a lot here, has addressed rumours regarding his promo on Dynamite last week. As I mentioned, following last Wednesday's show, there have been reports that Punk went off script when he called out Hangman Page, only for Page not to come out. Other reports suggested Punk is unhappy in AEW and has almost no-showed Dynamite last week as a result. Now, during an interview with Sports Illustrated, Punk was asked if he feels creatively fulfilled in AEW. Of course, this comes on the back of Punk posting a Instagram post saying that his 1 year anniversary, celebrating his 1 year anniversary at AEW, saying it's the happiest he's ever been and it's rejuvenated himself and he's reignited his passion for the industry. But when he was asked by Sports Illustrated if he feels creatively fulfilled in AEW, he said, quote, "Yes, 100%. You try not to put too much stock in internet rumors, but for AEW, I definitely think that's part of our audience. Twitter's not real life though. On top of that, a lie makes its way around the world twice before the truth puts his boots on or gets out of bed. If I addressed every rumor, I'd be here all day," he continued. "I love AEW. It's not a competition of who loves it more, or who's the heart and soul, or who's this and who's that. AEW allowed me a second chance to do what I do best, and that's professionally wrestle." Now, Punk also addressed reports of backstage friction in the company, noting that what has been made public is, quote, "just one side of the story." He said, quote, "It's one side of the story. My locker room is never closed. It's always open. Anybody who wants to DM Meltzer some BS can come to talk to me about it. It's not macho, stupid bullshit. I'm an adult. Come talk with me." Punk also addressed reports that he went off script when he called out Hangman Page on Dynamite last week. He said his motivation behind the promo was to, quote, "make people want to see what happens next and sell tickets." Quote, "That's what I'm here to do. Make people want to see what happens next. I'm trying to sell tickets to live events." That goes back to me saying Twitter isn't the real world. Twitter is a bunch of people that don't really care about your opinion. They want to find like-minded opinions that share their worldview. I'm trying to tell stories, sell tickets, and get people to tune in to Dynamite. Now, AEW President Tony Khan appeared on Busted Open Radio on Wednesday and also addressed Punk's comments towards Hangman, saying, quote, "It's unresolved anger, I think, from the world title match at Double or Nothing. We haven't really tied up all those issues," Khan said. There was clearly some stuff that didn't get resolved at Double or Nothing. So basically, in Punk's interview there with Sports Illustrated, he says that it's one side of the story, it's not completely true or accurate, and that what he said about Hangman on Dynamite was just to sell tickets. It's just to sell tickets and get people talking. Well, it got people talking. That's certainly fair. It got people talking. Whether it's one side of the story, I guess it probably is as well, right? Punk hasn't had his chance to defend himself, and it is just one report saying one thing from one source. However, if he wants to dispel it, come out and dispel it. And Punk didn't necessarily do that and deny that parts of it were true or fact or fiction, which is certainly interesting as well. But nevertheless, guys, let me know your thoughts on all of these AEW news stories. Let me know your thoughts about the talent meeting. Let me know your thoughts about tonight's unification match on Dynamite. And let me know your thoughts on CM Punk's comments in that interview as well. There is plenty going on in the world of AEW. We've got you all covered here on the channel. So be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.